Did scientists bring extinct dire wolves back to life after 12,000 years? Is the species coming back? At first glance, this might sound like science fiction. But no, this is a real scientific study. And it's being conducted in some of the world's leading laboratories. Scientists are trying to understand and maybe even bring back a massive extinct creature from the past, not just through its fossils, but by unlocking secrets hidden in its ancient DNA. If you're ready, let's travel back 12,000 years and dive into a story that pushes the boundaries of science. The scientific world, particularly in the field of genetic engineering, is not just shaping the future, but is also trying to reshape the past. This is part of a field called de-extinction, where scientists work on bringing extinct species back to life. It's a form of genetic time travel, just like the efforts to bring back mammoths or Tasmanian tigers. But now, it's the turn of the dire wolves. There's a crucial question. Is it really possible to bring an extinct species back to life using only a few pieces of DNA? Moreover, is it ethical? And would this creature really be the same creature? Or are we just creating a Frankenstein? Dire wolves were massive wolves that went extinct 12,000 years ago. Dire wolves, scientifically known as Kenisteros, were massive predators that once roamed the grasslands, forests, and tundras of North America around 12,000 years ago. Although they resembled modern-day wolves, there were significant differences between them. Dire wolves had thicker bones, stronger jaw structures, and larger muscle mass. They weren't just wolves, they were practically killing machines. They were almost 25% larger than today's gray wolves. On average, they weighed between 70 and 100 kilograms. Their powerful jaws allowed them to take down large prey, making them one of the dominant predators of their time. Interestingly though, compared to modern wolves, they are thought to have been somewhat more primitive in terms of intelligence and social structure. So why did they go extinct? According to scientists, there isn't a single answer to this question. As the Ice Age came to an end, North America underwent major environmental changes. Glaciers melted, the climate warmed, and large mammals, the primary prey of dire wolves such as mammoths, mastodons, and giant bison, began to disappear one by one. In addition, Homo sapiens had also set foot in North America. With their hunting techniques, use of fire, and ability to operate in groups, humans not only put pressure on prey populations, but also entered into direct competition with dire wolves. Some researchers suggest that as humans spread into the habitats of dire wolves, they depleted the prey resources, and may have even hunted the dire wolves themselves. The mystery of dire wolves has resurfaced, not just through their fossilized bones, but through a hidden treasure buried deep within them, ancient DNA, in other words, the genetic code of creatures that lived thousands of years ago. But how did this turning point come about? The story begins in the late 1980s, when scientists first succeeded in isolating fragments of DNA from the remains of extinct species. However, the real breakthrough came within the last 10 to 15 years, thanks to advancements in genetic sequencing technology. Today, it's not just the bones that are being studied. Scientists can now decode the DNA strands preserved within those bones. In 2016, a perfectly preserved dire wolf fossil was found beneath frozen soil in the Yukon region of Canada. Scientists were able to extract ancient DNA from this fossil. This was science's attempt to reread an extinct species. By decoding the DNA, it was like opening a time capsule. At first, only short genetic sequences could be read, because over time, DNA breaks down, degrades, and even gets mixed with the DNA of other organisms. But thanks to advancements in biotechnology, these mix-ups can now be sorted out, missing parts can be reconstructed, and the genetic history of creatures from thousands of years ago can be rewritten. This DNA does not resemble modern wolves. Analysis revealed that dire wolves were a completely different species, not interbred with today's wolves, which means, to bring them back, modern wolf DNA alone wouldn't be enough. This difference makes the dream of bringing them back to life much more complicated. The idea of creating a similar creature by inserting certain genes into an existing species only works if their genetic structures are closely related. In moth projects, this method can be used to some extent because Asian elephants and mammoths are close relatives. But that's not the case with dire wolves. So, scientists who want to bring back dire wolves don't have the easy option of simply transferring genes into a modern wolf or another animal. Instead, they need to synthesize ancient DNA almost from scratch, make it compatible with modern cellular structures, and apply much more complex gene editing techniques. Genetic engineering is entangled with ethical boundaries and technical limitations. Even if we had the DNA of a dire wolf, understanding how it functions, what kind of creature it would become, and whether that creature could even survive, those are far more challenging questions. Just like scientists inserted mammoth DNA into elephants' genes, they're now investigating whether dire wolf DNA can be synthesized and brought back to life through modern wolves. This is where one of the sharpest tools of modern genetic engineering comes into play: CRISPR-Cas9 technology. This system, which can edit genetic codes almost like a word processor, allows scientists to intervene at the genetic level with a kind of copy-paste approach. In other words, genetic fragments from dire wolves can be integrated into the DNA of modern wolves, just like inserting paragraphs into a written text. But here's where we need to pause for a moment. While CRISPR is a powerful tool, it only allows for genetic resemblance. Dire wolves didn't interbreed with modern wolves. They come from an entirely separate lineage. That means you can't bring back a dire wolf 100% just by transferring a few genes. Instead, scientists are aiming to create a sort of hybrid creature, one that carries some of the dire wolf's traits. So far, some synthesis steps have been successfully carried out at the cellular level, meaning there's no dire wolf running around in the wild just yet. This also highlights how limited the scientific reality is compared to the dinosaurs are back fantasy we saw in Jurassic Park. At the end of the day, the scientific process isn't as straightforward or thrilling as it's often presented to the public. Yes, genetic engineering is making huge strides, but bringing nature back exactly as it was is still a scientific dream. Gene editing technologies like CRISPR are advancing every day. Scientists are becoming increasingly successful at integrating the DNA of extinct species into living organisms. However, completing this process, from synthesizing the genetic material to integrating it into a living creature, having it born, grow, and become sustainable as a species, could take decades. So, is this going to take 10 years or 100? Honestly, no one knows for sure. But there's one thing the scientific community agrees on. It's possible. But when it will happen, how responsibly it will be done, and, most importantly, whether it should be done at all. Those questions are still up in the air. There's enormous scientific potential behind these projects, but that potential comes hand in hand with massive ethical and ecological debates. Let's say we actually brought dire wolves back. What happens next? Are we going to release them into the wild, or keep them in a controlled lab environment? Or more importantly, does a natural habitat for them even exist anymore? Assuming that a species that lived 12,000 years ago can adapt to today's world is a debate in itself. And what about the impact of this species on the current ecosystem? Where will it fall in the food chain? Which species might it threaten? Or which delicate balances could it disrupt? Yes, science is advancing, but the direction and limits of that progress no longer belong to scientists alone. These are questions that all of humanity must help answer. So, what do you think? Can science really bring nature back to life? Or, as nature has carved its own evolutionary path, would it be a mistake for us to reverse it? If this made you think, imagine what's coming next. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, and join me as we explore the questions that don't always have clear answers.